Hello, and welcome to the Thrive Mindset Podcast. I am so glad you are here with me. My name is Carrie Dahle, and I am your host. I am an entrepreneur, author, podcaster, manifester, and motivator. And I am on a mission to empower you to create the life of your dreams. If you are looking to up-level your life, relationships, finances, productivity, and success, you have come to the right place. I will share with you tools, resources, strategies, my failures, and my successes that have all helped me achieve the life of my dreams. It is my goal with this podcast to help you see your potential and empower you to create the life of your dreams. So let's get to it. Well, welcome back to the Thrive Mindset Podcast. I'm Carrie Dahle, your host, and today I have somebody who actually means a lot to me. Nikki Bingham has been my friend since we were 5 years old and in kindergarten. And she is somebody who I think that all of you will find fascinating. She's brilliant, but the main reason I have her here is because currently she's an English teacher in Brazil, and she has lived, I would say, many different lives, like many of us have. But what I appreciate most about Nikki in that is no matter whether it's just general change or it's loss, she somehow always embraces it and then embraces finding a new passion or exploring old passions. And it's something we should all strive to do. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me here, Carrie. I'm so I'm honored to be on here because I'm like a fan of the podcast. And when you first started doing it, I just thought, like, what a cool thing to do. You inspire me in the same way that you kind of jump into opportunity and do big things. I don't think I've ever seen you do something small. It just like becomes this big thing and I love the stuff that you're talking about in terms of, really, really understanding the role that we each play individually in creating the life that we live. And that means a lot to me. I'm doing a lot of work on that same kind of thing these days. And so I think that the message of your podcast is just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the best place to start, honestly, because obviously I've known you, we'll just basically say my whole life. But since nobody else does, or not everybody here listening does, why don't you just share your story?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in Ashland, Oregon, like you, and my story's convoluted. And, I had I think a pretty average life that I recognized as average, even when I was little tiny, until my parents, when I was in kindergarten. So gosh, it's hard. It's hard to tell a story, right? Without starting, I think at a certain point in your life, you recognize that you can't tell your own story without telling your parents' story.
Yeah.
And without telling your story, right? Like it's all back and connected and that sort of thing. But my mom was an addict. She became a drug addict. And so that my parents got divorced and my mom was gone in my childhood. And so that affected a lot of who I was and who I am. And it affected a lot of who my dad was and how he raised us. So my dad was really my primary parent, and he was married once after my mom to a woman who was not very nice to me or my brother, but was also the mother of my sweet younger sister. And then they were divorced, and my dad got remarried to our next door neighbor, who I absolutely love. And she was an amazing stepmom. So I've had, like, my childhood has all these crazy kind of twists and turns, things that felt really privileged, like living in a kind of idyllic little town, but also, being the poor kid in that really idyllic little town where most people were pretty wealthy, having a parent, my dad, who was super dedicated to us and loved us beyond anything he could really express. And also him having all these hangups about women and the way he felt like he was treated by women and how I represented that as a young woman. So when I grew up, then I graduated from high school, and no one in my family had ever been to college. So I didn't know how to get there. And I was on the debate team and I got good grades, and my teachers told me I had all this potential, and I had no idea how to go beyond high school. And at that point, the college counselors at our school weren't very helpful for kids who didn't have a clear track to college. So I ended up going back over to Ireland. I had been to Ireland with my best friend, Lori, the summer before. So I went back to Ireland. I worked in a pub. I lived with a boyfriend who later became my husband because we got pregnant young. Between that time, I lived in Connecticut as a nanny. I went to art school in Seattle. Colin and I came down to Oregon and promptly had 3 children.
Yes, you did.
So I was a mom by the time I was 21. And I had a lot of ideas about what being a mom should be because I didn't really have a mom. So I had this mythology of motherhood in my head and realized pretty soon that that was not who I was, this kind of mythological mom. And Colin and I were so young, neither of us really knew who we were ourselves, much less who each other was. And so we really started to fall apart as a couple. And, the stressors of being parents at a young age and working and not working and that sort of thing in an expensive world isolated, I think, each of us from each other. And then I started working as the debate coach, the assistant debate coach for my former debate team. By that time, I was living back in my hometown. And I met and fell in love with Rob Bingham, who was a debate coach at another school. And that was the death knell of my marriage, was me falling in love with someone else. So that ended my first marriage. And that was a dramatic ending, dramatic and traumatic in lots of ways. Rob was on his way out of the country at the time. He was on his way to Turkey. So he went to Turkey for a year, and I lived separate from my ex-husband, but raising our 3 girls together. And then I moved to Eugene, went back to school to get my teaching degree, and shared custody with Colin. And then my dad died. And when my dad died, Colin and I decided to let bygones be bygones because we both loved my dad, and kind of everything else felt petty around the death of my dad. So we decided to just really concentrate on co-parenting. And by that time, I was married to Rob and he was married to his wife, Molly. And so our girls had 4 parents. And I think anytime the parents outnumber the kids, it works pretty well.
Yes, it does.
we were able to navigate the co-parenting pretty well. And then after being married to Rob for 6 years, we decided to have a child. And so we had our son, Justice. And, we taught a little bit in Eugene and then moved back to Ashland again. That town just sucks me back in all the time. Mm-hmm. And taught there for a while, and then decided to go teach in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And teaching abroad was always part of our plan. Like I said, Rob was on his way out of the country when we fell in love. And so we taught here in Brazil. And then, there was pandemic. And then Rob broke back on a bike ride. And then in 2021, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer with a BRAF mutation that essentially made it untreatable. And so he lived for just under a year after that diagnosis and passed away in August of 2022. So I came back here to Brazil and stayed last school year. And then this school year is my last school year here. And in my projection, my last year teaching, at least traditionally in a high school setting. So I'm moving on, going back to the United States and pursuing a couple of different possibilities.
Yeah. Well, I've known that story forever, but it still brings so many emotion for me in many different ways. But I think right now, we're all coming off of the pandemic still. That was a lot for all of us. That was a lot. That was where you and I actually spent time reconnecting. Yeah, just for that need of connection, right? That need of connection with people. And then living through all that the last couple of years with you, I think what is most outstanding to me and most amazing is that you gracefully moved through that. And of course you felt every moment of it, and you shared it, and you didn't share some things at times and you'd share other things, but you moved through it and you felt all of that. But now here you stand a little over a year later, and you're moving forward with rediscovering you, right? And rediscovering who maybe you always have been within relationships, within being a mom, within being a wife, within being a friend, and then also discovering new passions that you want to explore.
Yeah, I think that it's strange, I think that were Rob still alive, we would be, on a trajectory, and probably at this stage exploring a new country to work in, onto different country, different teaching situation. And so teaching was kind of the long-term thing. And then after he passed away and I came back last year, I realized how much of teaching was just me and him in tandem. Like he had been my teaching partner everywhere I had taught. Almost every lesson plan has an echo of his voice in it, or that we worked really closely on in developing the curriculum for, one of which is Pedro Páramo, which is a Mexican surrealist novel and magical realism. And then the other is All the Pretty Horses, which was actually the first book that he had ever given me. So somewhere in our courting, we exchanged favorite books. This is what happens. English teachers fall in love with each other. And I gave him Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible, which is about a mom and 3 daughters. And it was like very close to home. And he gave me All the Pretty Horses, which is about a young man crossing borders, trying to figure out who he is and how he belongs in this world. So I think that the books that each of us gave to each other said something about who we are. And we fell in love over literature and over teaching and that kind of thing. So now when I go into the classroom, like he's there with me, which is beautiful and also really difficult because it's like he's just always there. So I know that it is time for me to do something different. And yeah, it's kind of a strange situation because I feel like where I'm going is really amazing and really positive. And like you said, I think expresses a part of me that was always there. So I would be on a different trajectory, and the expression of myself would be completely different if he were still alive. And I think also good, beautiful, I would still be happy. And now I'm trying to be good and beautiful and happy in a totally different iteration of myself. And I think that's kind of what I've discovered, is that tragedy maybe just breaks something open or pushes a wall down or pushes a beautiful building that you've built together. And suddenly it just gets raised and you kind of go, well, okay, I have these materials. I guess I'm going to start again. And then what you end up building is different than what you had built before. And you miss some of what you had built before. But at the same time, you're like, actually, I kind of like that the kitchen's in a new spot. I kind of like this window over here that wasn't there before. And now I have a chance to rebuild something in a different way. And that's what I'm concentrating on. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a great illustration of that is when you and Justice went through the house and made it your home after coming home, right?
That was by Brazilian law. After someone that you love passes away, you have like 8 days to get yourself together and get back to work, and the school that I worked for was so generous with the time that I was able to spend away being with Rob while he was alive. And I think that was most important to me. And I advocate, I want to become an advocate for that in so many ways. So, the post passing felt fast coming back home, but we came back here to Brazil. And when we walked into the house, it felt a little like the house was also grieving. I walked in and we have a house that is decorated. Everything just felt gray. And went into the room where Rob had all of his recording equipment for his music, and the cords were kind of everywhere. He was never the most organized person. Cords were all over the place, and things were dusty because we've been gone months, even though my housekeeper was really great about, keeping things nice and neat. And so I was kind of, in there, and Justice was in there playing video games. And I just said, hey, bud, would it feel bad to you if I kind of put some of these things away, some of these things of Dad's? And he was like, no, actually. And do you think we could get like clothes for this couch? And I was like, dude, we can do all kinds of stuff. And so we went to, the place here that is essentially like, the Home Depot, Costco, Target of Sao Paulo. And we bought all kinds of stuff and just moved furniture around and livened up the chi in the house. And that made a huge difference. Really became, our place to be, with, tons of obviously who was still here. But I was able to make space for things that were really important to him. Like I still have his bicycle. His bicycle is kind of set up over here in the living room, and it's kind of there like a piece of art in my house. His recording equipment is still put away because I don't know how to use that yet. His guitars, I came home and saw, and I thought, well, those are never going anywhere. I'm never going to sell those. I can't ride his bike. His bike is too big, but I can maybe learn how to play the guitar. And so I dedicated myself to that. I found some really great guy online who was like 5 minutes a day. All you need to learn how to play the guitar. I thought like, okay, I can. Now it's like I love it so much. So I've been playing for a little bit over a year now, and it's great. Learning great songs and that kind of stuff. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. But to me, that's you rediscovering a passion, but then adding something new, right? Because you've always loved writing and reading and all those things and writing poetry and art. And it all just kind of goes together, and at least in my mind for you. And now I watch, you post on Instagram, your beautiful videos of you singing and play and music that you've written. And it's beautiful.
It's pretty crazy. The first time that I posted a song was a song that I had written. And I didn't feel, it was like, I didn't feel compelled to post anything that I was playing that wasn't something I had written before, because I was like, so bad. It was like millions and millions of people who can do this better. I'm not going to post a video of me sort of, bumbling my way through a song that someone else could play so much better. But a song that you write, like no one knows that tune before you sing it. And no one knows the phrasing of the lines before you sing it. And so when I wrote the first song that I wrote, I was really proud of it. I was like, I legitimately did that. I just wrote a song. It has stanzas, and it has a chorus, and it has a tune, and it rhymes. Look what I can do. And so I did. I poor playing, but it was groundbreaking because I had actually created something that no one else had ever created before. And it was almost like having another kid. And so now I've written, in fact, I just am working on another song that I just wrote a couple of days ago, and they just kind of keep coming, and I keep writing them down, and I make videos of them so I don't forget the tunes. Mm-hmm. And occasionally I'll post those videos, and sometimes I'll go back later and then re-record it. And now I have friends who are music people who are really encouraging me, who want me to go to recording studios and actually record things. I have another friend on Facebook who runs kind of a vetted open mic, and asked if I would, when I was back in town in the United States, be willing to participate in that. I played in front of my students for the first time a couple weeks ago, and that was my first live audience. So that was really like the very first thing that one of them said, like, oh my gosh, Miss, you play the guitar. Like, do you write any songs? And I was like, yeah, actually I do. And they said, play one of your songs for me. I thought, oh my God, the very first time I ever play anything live for anybody is the songs that I wrote. And so I played the one. Yeah. Seniors in high school. And so I played a very sad song that I'd been working. And they just like broke into applause, and they were so supportive and sweet. And then they asked me to play something else. And then they were like, Miss, can you play Wonderwall? And I was like, I don't know. I've never tried. And so we looked at the chords and I kind of strummed it and they played along. They like sang with me and it was so cool. And so then all day long, I had the guitar with me. And so I was playing for my other classes too. And kids would come in and go, Miss, you play the guitar? Will you play something for us? And so I just would. And they all, every time would burst into applause. And then they were telling other teachers and other teachers were coming up to me and they were like, gosh, we heard that you played the guitar. The kids were so impressed. And, it's cool. And I feel like I'm like I said, I've only been playing for years, so I'm not a great player. My singing has gotten better. I'm actually kind of proud of my singing voice in a lot of ways. It's nothing operatic or amazing or groundbreaking, but at this stage I can carry a tune and I like that. Mm-hmm. And it kind of has this sort of rock star thing to it. Like I always had this little bit of a crush on Rob when I knew him early on. And then when I saw him with a guitar and he was playing, like, oh man, like my heart was just gone. Then people are so much more attractive when they're holding a guitar. I'm really, really hoping that helps me out. I share.
I don't think you need to worry about that.
You put on a black tank top and a pair of ripped jeans and you've got a guitar, like you suddenly got like some mojo that you don't have as just like, the English teacher.
That's true. But you are moving away, like you said, from being the English teacher. Are you pursuing any more with your love for the written word outside of writing songs? Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm really hoping to kind of make something of that. So I've made some connections over the last 6 months mm-hmm. that I feel like there are people in this writing community back in Oregon. And that's been really important to me. A few of them have taken the time to give me some extensive feedback on the things that I've written. And these are published authors and people who have been writing for decades. And they keep encouraging me to continue on this path. And so I'm trying to lean into that. I'm putting together my portfolio. And right now I'm just kind of putting it together on a Google site so that I at least have a link to send to talent agencies. Mm-hmm. A good friend of mine up in Oregon, a professional writer, and he writes for a living this is the talent agency that he went through. And so he gave me that link and said, you got to get in touch with these guys. And this is how I'm, why I'm a writer now. So I know that there is a path for that. And I think before this, I didn't know or see the path and I had no way to connect to it. And now I have that. And I kind of don't know why I wouldn't follow that at this stage, it's what I want to do. I've had conversations with folks recently. So, I have a soft landing opportunity in a kind of administrative position at a cannabis company in Eugene. And I'm excited about that. I love the people who run the farm and the company. And I'm excited to be a part of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But recently I was talking to another friend who is a lawyer in Salt Lake City. And he was like, well, what is it that you really want to do? Like, if you could choose what you wanted to do, what would you want to do? And I was like, every time somebody asks me that, I say, write. I want to write. That's what I want to do. And it occurred to me then, I was like, okay, well, then that's what I should really be trying to do. Like these other situations where I have opportunities to do something that will make me some money or give me a good living or that kind of thing. That's good. But I honestly think I can make something of the writing. And so I'm trying to lean into that. So right now it's still kind of ethereal.
Yeah.
But I'm taking some concrete steps to make it happen. And that feels good.
Well, like I said, I feel like you are one who through change, through loss, you always have this ability to either rediscover or discover a piece of you that wasn't there in the previous stage. And it's beautiful. And I love where you're headed. I am curious though, your girls are what, 20, 23 to 26,
20,
27.
yeah, 6, 25, and 23.
Yeah. So, I mean, similar ages to my kids. And I'm curious. I mean, I know you give them advice all the time, but what would you say to them now, looking back, at all these years? What would you say to them about really like focusing on them and focusing on the things that they want and not letting that slip away because of what the world says or because what outside, society says?
I feel like I've said that to them their whole lives. And so, even before these kinds of things, and in a lot of ways, like that's what teaching has been for me too. I really love teaching and I have loved teaching. And so that felt like a pursuit of something that was, important and authentic to me. And so my oldest daughter has decided, she lives over in London, and she works she is a manager of a Michelin star restaurant there. And she, I think, just has such a great capacity for the hospitality industry. She gets that from her dad. Her dad's really charismatic. And so I feel like that's an expression of who she really is. And it's not born of, you must do this kind of job, or you must, go to college and do these things. She's really forged her own path that way, and internationally, which I have so much respect for. And then her sisters are illustrators and designers. And so they're both pursuing their talents and the things that they love to do as well. And that doesn't, that means that there are things that are difficult. You don't make a lot of money, especially right away in those jobs, but it also means that they're really choosing the things that they love. And my understanding of the way that the world works is, to a large degree, if you are doing what you love to do, you are willing to throw so much time into it and so much of your energy and who you are into it, that the universe like wants to compensate you for that, right? Like there's this balance, but you're just like putting that out there and like it comes back to you. And so I believe that the paths that they are on, because forge them as individuals and autonomous individuals, are going to be spiritually and emotionally and intellectually and monetarily profitable for them. And I love that about the way that they live their lives. My son has always talked, like since he was about 5 years old, has talked about wanting to convert a bus. At first it was a VW van. I felt like that was a much more like attainable goal, but now it's a bus. He wants to convert a bus. He wants to make it into a solar powered vehicle, and he wants to travel around, and he wants to be self-sustaining. Like he has talked about that. He's looked at like this sort of travels with Charlie sort of thing. He's got the idea of the dog that comes with him, and he's got the bus all converted. A while back, a friend of mine on Facebook was actually selling a bus that he had partially converted, and it wasn't quite done yet. And I think he wanted like 11,000 for it. And I was really tempted to buy. And I was like, man, if I bought that, where would I park it for a year? And then wherever we live, when we come back to the United States, has to have room for that. But I would love for him to have that project and start that project in high school and then take that project to university with him. If he went someplace like OSU and focused on, engineering and that kind of thing, like that could be part of what he creates. Yeah. So even those sorts of things where it's like, wow, your son's going to live in a van down by the river. But it's not that, right? It's something really cool and exploratory and free, and also requires these skills. And he's already starting those things. When he does summer camp, he elects to do summer camps that are like, trackers camps, and he learns survival skills. And so all I ever want my kids to do are the things that are who they are. Because God, I can't imagine living this life and trying to be someone that I'm not. I guess I can't imagine that. I tried to do that sort of thing. I tried to be someone that I imagined everybody wanted me to be. And that was this myth of a mother. And then I realized that I was a much better mother when I was not trying to be any other mother than the mom that I am. That's when I became the best mom, and my son and I have such amazing relationships because I don't ever do anything that's not who I am. And I don't expect them to either.
I loved it when you were talking about when you love something and you put time into it and passion into it, that the universe brings it back to you. I mean, because I feel the same way. But I'm curious, that's such a concept that so many people don't get. Like the world does not teach that, right? The world does not teach that that's what happens. But where did that come from in you? Like where did you learn that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I was in high school, I worked at Soundpiece, the New Age bookstore. And so I was surrounded by some pretty incredible people often in there. People that I worked with were knowledgeable and wise in a way that transcended anything that I really got at home. My home situation, like people were very pragmatic, like farmers, it's like, does that grow in the ground? If it doesn't grow in the ground, then like you can't count on it, And so I think that was probably my first introduction to the ideas that we are more connected than our little human brains can ever really conceive of. And that there's no discernible difference between you and me. Like we are part of the same organism, and this organism is all around us, and it's of the air and the furniture that we use and the clothes that we wear and the love that we exude and the jealousy that we exude. Like this is all, it's all energy based and it's all part of the same thing. And so I feel like that when you put something out, it sort of rotates back in. At the same time, having said that, I just was working with, I work with a hypnotherapist who I adore. She's amazing. And I've made some significant breakthroughs in the way that I think about the world with her. And I was recently thinking about money, because I've always worked for institutions. And so working for an institution means that you have, the steady paycheck and the income and the health insurance and all that kind of thing. And I'm about to leave that reality. And it's been since I was, 28 that I have not worked for an institution. And feeling a little bit nervous about that, because in all the other situations, I've had a partner that, if something went wrong with me, like the partner is there, right? The partner kind of helps to buoy the situation. And so now I don't have that. I am the only person in the room. I am the grown up. I am the decider. And I have to understand money and the way that money works. But growing up poor did not necessarily prepare me for that. So I had this moment when I was working recently with my hypnotherapist, and we were just kind of doing this co-meditation, and I was talking about my hangups with money, and we were doing this thing, and she talked about money as potential and seeing money just as a physical representation of potential, and that money itself does not have a moral quality to it. It's not evil. It's not good. It really is just potential, and that you receive when that you put out potential, and then to do this, you have potential to do this, you're talented in this way. And so I saw potential as something that I had an obligation to output into the world, but I never saw it as something that I deserved to take in. And so my duty was to show that I could thrive even in circumstances of deprivation, that I could transcend my poverty and still get educated, that I could, grow up amongst people who have never left the state of Oregon and still travel internationally. When I started to make that connection, I started to realize that my hangups about money were the same hangups that I had carried with me all the time about food, about calories, and that deprivation had been something that I had kind of forced upon myself in a lot of ways, because I felt like that was how I could prove that I was better than my circumstances somehow, that I was separate from my circumstances. And how I could kind of control that was to say, well, I can still be an athlete and eat barely anything.
Yeah.
I don't need to take in calories. I don't need to take in nourishment, because that's that's sort of feeding something that shouldn't be fed. And when I made that connection, that I had really been denying myself what had been being offered to me all around, it was kind of shocking to me, because I don't think that way about love. I've never denied myself love. I've sought out love. And I feel like love is the same kind of potential, right? And it is filled with the motivation to create. And so insofar as love is filled with that same kind of potential, so is money, so is food, so is friendship and bonding and just connectivity, so is writing. Like all of these things they're just the same thing, but just different. And so, money and food, it's the same as the stuff that I love and that I do and that I create in the world. And that totally broke down the feelings that I had about that separation. And so I've been thinking a lot about that idea that you just reiterated, that I had said, that what you put out into the world, that potential that you put out into the world wants to give that back to you. And all you really have to do is kind of decide that you're going to take it, that you're going to accept it back. I mean, I can say all that. There are obviously, barriers all around us to manifesting that in a lot of ways, and there are social systems and paradigms and policies, and there's, racism, and there's disenfranchisement, and there is ostracization, and there's abuse, and there's tyranny and oppression and slavery and war, and all of these things that are counters to the beautiful positive aspects of that potential. So that, those things are always there, and I'm not denying that those are there. But I'm also saying that it is possible to not be consumed by that negativity, to understand it, to understand that it's there, but not let it become you. And I think I've come to that realization through my experience with grief, that I can grieve, I can be grieving and also be joyful at the same time. I can be deeply, deeply sad and also in love at the same time. I can be far away from someone and feel so close to them. So these are what seem to be contradictory truths, and yet they exist in the world. And so the idea that you can decide what kinds of ways to respond to the universe is a contradictory truth to, racism, But the two things exist at the same time. I don't think I have to deny that one exists in order to believe that the other is true.
I love that. It's such a truth about an abundance mindset, right? People think abundance and they automatically go money, but it's not about money. It's about being abundant in life. It's about abundant in love, abundant in friendship, abundant in whatever the moment is, right? And I love that you are growing in that, and that you're recognizing those things that have held you back from it, because it's all coming to you. I can see it. I know it's coming. I'm so excited for you.
Me too. I'm so excited too. And the cool thing is that as I've come to these realizations, I have developed a vocabulary to speak to people about it. And I talk to my students about it all the time. We talk about authenticity. We talk about freedom. We talk about existentialism. We talk about the idea that the world is absurd, and yet we create meaning in it, that we can feel, isolated and yearning for love. And kind of all we need to do in a lot of respects is just turn toward it. If we just turn our gaze a little bit, if we just adjust our expectations a little bit, if we let go of expectations, if we don't expect love to look a certain way, if we don't expect joy to be in a certain context, and suddenly we find joy in all kinds of things. The word abundance is so important to me. I've had a debate with some good friends about the difference between the words surrender and embrace. So there's a lot of talk in this kind of context about surrender, right? You surrender to what the world is going to offer to you. And in that, you find a kind of flow. You find a cohabitation with the world that maybe you didn't find if you're kind of resistant or you have all these expectations. And I said, surrender to me feels sort of passive, and it feels like it doesn't joyfully embrace all of the things that the world has to offer. And for me, anyway, like that joy is part of what all of this means. I am embracing that abundance. I'm not just sort of surrendering to the idea that the universe will offer it to me. I'm like, bring it in, bring it in, big hug. Like I just want it. I want all the friends. I want all the love. I want all the laughter. And in that, I'll take all the grief. Like I will fully feel my grief. And a lot of my writing is about my grief. A lot of my songwriting is about my grief. And part of what I feel pretty passionately about these days is about normalizing that, because I feel like accepting the idea that we grieve is part of accepting the idea that we also deserve the abundance that feels like the counterbalance to loss.
I love that. I love listening to you. I love every part of this conversation because like you just said, teaching your children, or not your children, but your kids in class, just to be authentic. And it's such a shame that so many people hide behind these masks and these walls and these, pretenses that they think people need or that they think others need. When the truth is, all we really need is just authenticity. I mean,
totally. And we yearn for that from each other, right? Really want. It's the way that we connect. If we're just real with each other, we can start to connect that way. But we also have to accept the way other people are real.
Well, if there's one other thing that you could share today, what would it be?
I guess the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, sort of in this same vein in a lot of ways, is the way that we as a culture and as individuals understand each other's value and I guess authenticity. I'm thinking a lot about that, as a writer, and then, AI floating around there. I'm like, wow, what does this mean for someone who wants to write that we're trying to develop artificial intelligences to do the things that people in the world do? And I feel like maybe the continued conversation will allow us to figure out what we value in each other. But I think that maybe there's a turn toward that when we talk about abundance, is turning toward the things that are not perfect, turning toward the things that show our human flaws, that show our grief, that show all of our wrinkles and our stains. And instead of looking for the clear surfaces and the plastic lines, that instead we find the things that are a little gritty and a little wobbly, and we love those. And if we could do that a little bit more often too, I think we wouldn't be so captivated by the shiny, glitzy things that often detract or distract us from that authenticity, that real beautiful abundance that is what it means to be an organic living thing in this world.
Well, thank you for being on here today. I really, really appreciate visiting with you. I mean, I always love visiting with you, but I love that you wanted to do this with me today. Again, so honored. And just to be able to have a conversation like this in any circumstance is thrilling to me. It's hard for me to sometimes have banal conversations anymore, because all I want to do is talk about like the really big, deep things. Don't you want to talk about how connected we all are? Yeah, I'm thrilled to be on here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. I hope that you all loved listening to Nikki's story as much as I do. I mean, I know that she is a long-term friend, but her words of wisdom and the take that she has in life, and just the way that she embraces change and loss and feels it, but also explores the new, is pretty inspiring. So I hope that you found something in today's podcast that was helpful, that excited you, that reminded you that you too can embrace the change and you can find something new in life and you can go back to old things and you can be whatever it is you want to be. And the universe is going to bring it to you. So I just thank you for being here. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I would ask that you follow, you like, comment, you share with your friends. And above all else, remember that I believe in you and you can manifest the life of your dreams.